Welcome, Charles. I understand that you moved from Austin to Denver recently. Would you mind kind of walking us through your career and what has brought you to here?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me today. So recently moved to Denver to explore another opportunity here, and very fortunate and blessed to be here. Austin is a place where I grew up, and so I'm a native to that. Obviously, cut my teeth in surgery there several years ago. Started out as a surgical nurse, and worked my way up in various, organizations with HCA and with Ascension. Doing lots of things, robotics, and then obviously getting into management and that type of stuff. So growing into this role, it's been exciting, and lots of exciting things happen in Austin as well. It'll always be home, so that's a great thing too. Keep in contact with folks that are there and still, and keep a very close eye on the climate that's there and the healthcare climate. As we talked previously, lots of similarities between the cities. Both great places to be, lots of growth, lots of patients to take care of, and lots of need here. So I feel really privileged to be able to work in both environments and have those opportunities.
Did you have a mentor when you were ascending up the org chart?
Yeah, actually, I've had a few of them. I've been very blessed to have those. Mentorship for me actually started very early on when even back into the high school days, I was assigned a mentor. So I think I learned very early on the value of somebody mentoring you. Actually had a NASA engineer of all things mentor me when I was in high school, not because I was in engineering, but just because that was who was provided to me, and it was unbelievable experience. Learned a lot of great things and kept in contact for several years. But when it comes to the career, I've been, again, very fortunate to have mentors as early on as being a circulator and having some of my one-ups mentor me. I learned very early on that I wanted to be involved in management. And so folks really set me up with the right opportunities and gave me the correct experience to kind of be like, hey, if this is what you want to do, we'll help you get there. Here's one thing you can take on or one thing you can do to do it. And then kind of coach me through those scenarios. And that kind of grew. And that's really, again, provided that foundation for me. And I've tried to pay it forward. I've participated, and I still do participate in several mentor programs in the organizations that I work in. And I've mentored several folks that have, grown in their careers too. And so really excited about that and really see the true value of mentorship.
Tell me more about those mentor programs. Are those in your hospital system? Are they system specific, or are you participating with like some kind of outside group like Big Brothers Big Sisters? Tell me more.
Sure. So I've done some Big Brothers work outside of the hospital, but the majority of mentorships that I've done have been within organizations. Ascension, where I just came from, was very big on mentoring, which is a great thing. That's something I got involved in. Some of that is superior you're picked, that type of stuff from some of your one-ups and encouraged to be in those, and that's a good thing. And things you volunteer for. So I've been fortunate enough to have both opportunities and participated in those, and typically work with managers or other leaders, not necessarily peers, but perhaps one level below, and work with them in terms of, hey, how do you become the best at your current role? How do you define opportunities for growth in future roles? Where do you want to go? And a lot of that, help them work through not just daily things and how to manage their day and their workload, but also how to prepare themselves for future growth opportunities.
I see. Okay, great. And so now with your boss and maybe most recently with Ascension, in your opinion, how much contact should you have with your boss?
I think the contact level, it can be variable. I think to some extent, depending on the circumstance. Given our current climates of COVID and things like that, sometimes contact is even more necessary. But I think one of the most important things for directors to do is to really get to know their one-up, gain that level of trust in working. That will typically present where contact is not as often, and because they trust you to do your part. But then the other thing is you need to reciprocate that, and ensure that you are keeping them in the loop on things, and that kind of continues to as you learn your rhythm as a leadership team, that continues to kind of grow, and then you get more, obviously, I would say carte blanche, but you get an opportunity to kind of explore things on your own, make your own decisions, and some more autonomy, right,
Sure.
with those kind of things. So I think, a decent amount of communication, perhaps on a daily basis, and it's situation dependent, right? We learn very early on what our one-ups need to know and how to keep them in the loop, and that's typically the best policy. If I'm ever questioning it, I just go ahead and communicate it, because sometimes you just can't over communicate things.
Do you ever find yourself, um, uh, well, certainly now with you have now assimilated into your new organization, looking at an antiquated system? And if so, tell me a little bit about how you remedied it.
Yeah. So I think with my new organization, there's several technology, options that you can use in terms of facilitating a surgery schedule on a daily basis. So
Okay.
when it comes to running the board, let's say, for
Yes.
instance, and that type of stuff, the technology options that are out there are almost limitless these days. It's pretty amazing when you have OR control systems that are essentially touchscreen, and you're able to communicate non-verbally through a computer system with your pre-op, PACU, and post-operative, plus other areas of the house to kind of determine patient flow and that type of stuff. Certain facilities haven't adopted those trends yet. And so when you come from facilities that have, and then you come to a facility that hasn't, that kind of tends to slow things down at times. And it's a little bit of an adjustment. I've found that, the great thing about this organization is that our senior leadership team is very open to exploring these options, and in fact sees the great value in that, and they take that feedback from their leaders, and they work with those leaders to accomplish those goals, and we all make business cases for things, and that type of stuff, and so those are some of the options that we could do. So I would say that technology within the surgical arena, in terms of patient flow, oftentimes is not seen but can be discovered, and thus represents how you deal with the antiquated system, right?
Right. And it sounds like the surgery scheduling system that allows you to automatically communicate with pre-op,
Mm-hmm.
pack to the other departments. That's where you feel like there's a delta between the antiquated systems and some of the newer technology.
Absolutely. And I would say, just to kind of furthermore that point, would be in terms of data acquisition for the operational efficiencies that we need to drive as OR directors.
Okay.
Oftentimes those systems have those components. So one of the challenges for me as a director has always been clean data,
Okay.
available data. But a lot of these systems now that are coming to the market have the potential to pull data at one click. First case on time starts, turnover times, and that type of stuff. And you use that to basically manage your business, which is the OR, drive the improvements and the operational efficiencies that we're expected to have. And so that's another antiquated system that those kinds of electronic or those technologies can help with.
Right. Okay. Last question about that. So, are you inputting data on a daily basis for the on-time starts, turnover times, et cetera? Is it somehow automated?
So with these new systems, it's automated, and
Okay.
which is the great part about it, right? So in that sense, it's less time, because there's not, whether it's from a productivity standpoint, an FTE entering that data, or the human element where there could be errors, right? Because we want good, clean data. It's actual computers that are basically, in the background running, and when cases are moved around, or when cases automatic, when they start, that information is then pulled into different fields and then into a report where we can access it as leaders, and kind of drive those operational efficiencies.
Right. And those reports, it's what's so valuable for you to manage your department on a day-to-day basis.
Absolutely. And then, when we report out at our surgery councils and that type of stuff, on the strong work that our teams are doing, or the opportunities that we have, having good, clean data at your fingertips is essential, right?
Right. Right. Okay. While there's no specific path to becoming a director, what did you find that you wished that you had been trained and prepped on as you ascended up from manager to director?
Sure, that's a great question. I think, one of the things when it comes to a director versus manager is, I like to call tactical versus strategic, right? So when it comes down to your level of thinking or your way of thinking in terms of being able to see the big picture, the 30,000-foot view. As a director, you're oftentimes involved in, or it's good to be involved in leadership meetings that involve strategy of the entire organization. So you can kind of better plan how your department needs to support that. And so I think in terms of not a defined path as a director, I think as you come up, learning that way of thinking early on to be able to see not just what's happening because we make this one decision, but what's going to happen on step 2 and 3 because this decision is made is really important. And I think in terms of that, as a director, that those are important ways to think about things.
Kind of a shift in the way that you are
Yeah.
interpreting a decision made, right?
Yeah, and I think it's kind of it's just that shift occurs naturally because of the work that you typically do from a manager tactical perspective of handling day-to-day operational challenges, right, and staffing and that type of stuff. It's not that directors don't handle that type of stuff. It's just that typically when managers handle that on a day-to-day basis, a director is to for instance, we want to grow this service line. How can we support that? And then looking 2 or 3 steps down about recruiting and that type of stuff. How do we bolster that workforce to be able to handle those initiatives?
Right. That's insightful. That's good. Okay. What investment would you like your C-suite to make that would create either more profit, more efficiency, grow volume, et cetera?
Sure. Well, I think at this facility, our C-suite has done a great job and they're very strategic focused. So that's great. They've used the input of my input as well as some of theirs to kind of collaborate towards growth initiatives. One thing that they're planning on investing in is one of those systems that takes us out of that antiquated data pool and daily operational workflow.
Okay.
So the electronic systems that we kind of talked about earlier, we're actually it's by Healthcare Solutions. It's called OR Control Systems, and so that's one that I've used previously, and it's a great product. So that's something that we're planning on investing in here, and that's going to make a huge difference for not just the OR but all procedural areas. So cath lab, IR, all those types of procedural areas are all going to be able to, and endoscopy, they're all going to be able to benefit from this. It'll cut out probably 80% of the verbal communication that needs to take place because it'll all be on a screen and things will get moved around and you'll be able to see it. We can program alerts all over the place, so you can have alerts on your phone and that type of stuff. Again, kind of cutting out the, for lack of a better term, human element in terms of allowing clinicians and our leaders and everything to focus on the daily operations and what we need to be doing instead of making calls to people and that type of stuff and just continuing with patient flow.
All right. Well, that's great. Terrific. Okay. And so what advice do you have for your younger self, for the Charles that's coming up just out of, nursing school and into your first role in the operating room?
Sure. I think main point of advice would be to focus on the task at hand. I think oftentimes as we want to grow naturally, we tend to really focus on what's the next step. But I've found that if you focus on what you're doing currently and you excel in your current role, those opportunities and successes will come. So I think a little bit of patience and really just focusing on what you're currently assigned to do. So if you're in a supervisor position overseeing a service line, focus on that service line, focus on supporting your staff and supporting your leaders, and good things will come for you. Next thing you know, you'll be a manager and then vice versa and director. So I would say for a young Charles, that's kind of like have that patience and truly focus on the task at hand, and good things will come.
Sounds like stay in the moment. In other words, if
Exactly.
you are excellent in your job that's in front of you, when you're young, sometimes you've got your eye on your next role maybe, and you're thinking and being distracted about your career progression. Now that you've been promoted up the ranks, you know that good things come to those who do well and stay in the moment.
Agreed. Absolutely. I mean, you said it perfectly. And I think it's important to note in that too, kind of a disclaimer would be it's important to know where you're going as well, or where you want to go. We don't want to distract from that, but at the same time, don't let it distract you from your current. Yeah.
Terrific. And then what's your superpower?
I think relationship building.
Okay.
I think it's probably the most important thing that we do in our roles. Quite honestly, I think it leads to a lot of success, and just in our daily, and excluding the personal side of it, but just working a relationship. So I think I've had a lot of success, and part of that was how I was raised, in terms of my mentorships as I've come up through the ranks, and the importance of relationships and following through and holding true to what you say you're going to do, and just nurturing those relationships is super important. It'll get you further than anything, in my opinion.
All right. Terrific. All right. Well, that concludes today's episode of 40 Fast and Future with Charles Kaczmarek. Charles, thank you very much for today.
Thank you.
Great work.